Hello, and welcome to Hacking HR September series. Today we'll be talking about how we reinvent the performance management, and part of that is going to be today we'll be specifically focusing on designing the performance management that rewards progress and success in all things people, culture, and strategy. I'm Mine. I'm based in Istanbul, Turkey. It's almost evening here. So let's see where our audience is from. We have people from Zambia, Iran, South Africa, India, and Las Vegas, Mozambique, Ethiopia. I mean, we have people from all around the world, Sri Lanka, Croatia. Wow. This is what I love the most about Hacking HR. We have so many people connecting from all around the world. We have really diversity and the cultural representation of the globe. So let's see who else we have. Atlanta, please do write your questions here in the comments area as we go along, because I'll be also addressing those questions as we are having the discussion. That also adds more value to our discussion. So let's have our panelists to the stage. Hello, everyone. Hi, Nicole, Kevin, Nicole, Lisa. How are you? How is everyone? Where are you joining from?
I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area.
Okay. Kevin?
I am in El Paso, Texas today.
Okay. Nicole?
I'm north of Cincinnati, Ohio.
So we have everyone from the US. And do I pronounce your name right by the Nicole? Is it Nicole?
Yes, it's Nicole. So I'll, for the benefit of Nicole Roberts, I'll go by Nicole J today so that we don't get confused. And I am calling in from Memphis, Tennessee.
Okay. Perfect. So, before we kick off the discussion, because I know that we are all enthusiastic about this topic and we cannot wait to kick off the discussion. But before we do that, I want to have a quick round and just like, have you introduce yourselves just briefly what you're doing, what's your title, and why are you here today? Because some of you also have been having some multiple hats. So, which hat are you wearing today? Let's start with Lisa.
Good morning, everyone. Lisa Sanders. I'm joining you from, like I said, San Francisco Bay Area. I am a bit of a unicorn. I am an HR operations talent executive. I kind of span across organizations, finance, legal, contracts, all of those things on the operations side. But my passion is people and places and talent and culture. And I've been doing this for 25 years. So thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk about this.
Thank you for coming. Kevin?
Hi, I'm Kevin Buyin. I'm the Chief HR Officer for a company called Werner Co. Professional Brands. So we have a footprint both in North America, US and Mexico. And then we have several thousand employees across Europe. So Germany, UK, France, Hungary, and a small footprint in Australia. And the kind of focus on people and talent and culture is key to driving the business performance. And that's what got me on the panel today.
Great. Nicole?
Hello again. I'm an HR executive. I've been in the field for over 20 plus years. Have worked in a variety of industries, and so most particularly working in the life sciences medical space.
Great. And let me call you Jones and the other Nicole as Roberts so that we don't get mixed up. Okay. And Roberts.
Good morning, and afternoon and evening, wherever you are. I'm Nicole Roberts. I have spent the last 20 plus years in HR, most recently pivoting that career into consulting. And so really excited about this panel because the entire focus of my career has been ensuring that people feel valued, appreciated, supported, and seen. But what better way to do that than being really intentional with your performance processes? This very stylish haircut of mine is courtesy of my very recent battle with breast cancer. So I am not only excited, but very grateful to be with you this morning.
You look amazing. So let's kick off the discussion. And I would like to kick off the discussion with asking you if anyone has gone through a remarkable change in their performance management systems over the last couple of years. Please raise your hand if you have done so. Do we have anyone? Lisa. So let's go with you first. What was the fundamental change before and after on your performance management system?
Yeah, I think that the performance management transformation starts way before you actually put together a program around performance management. You have to go back and look at the culture of your company, right? It might require organizational change, right? To revamp that, the culture a bit, right? I personally believe very strongly that a coaching, mentoring, and we'll just call it coaching and mentoring and sponsoring culture is where that starts, right? If we don't have that as part of our core values, it's very, very hard to have a performance management program, system, whatever, that supports growth and potential and openness and vulnerability around communication and all of that. So I started with that. We all went home, we all went remote, right? And that gave us all some very interesting challenges on how we kind of keep track of people, right? In with our HR hats on. And that was where I started. And I basically it was an organizational change. I had to start at the top with my co-executives, make sure I had buy-in, and that we were going to shift to this coaching, mentoring, and sponsoring type of culture. After that, once we had a good cadence going there, it required a lot of training. It took a good year plus to do that because I had a lot of new managers that had never done that. I brought some people in to do executive coaching, that people who didn't know kind of how to make this change, that I couldn't do it with everyone. And then I did kind of middle management and down from there on my own. And once we did that, then we were able to roll out a program that was continuous. I believe very firmly that performance management should not happen at your 1 year anniversary. It's the past. You're talking about a year of what? Right? It's not going to change anything, right? And we have to understand that performance management is a very powerful tool that we have to encourage growth in our employees. And if we don't use it mindfully and responsibly, it won't work, right? It falls apart because you're talking about stuff that happened in the past. If you're doing reviews once a year, right? You need to be having continuous conversations, which goes right back to that coaching and mentoring culture that I believe needs to be deeply rooted in organizations to actually make performance management effective, right? And that's what we're here about, right?
You pointed out some really crucial points like the cadence and the values. I think you open up really a huge space for discussion. So I would like to take it from there and just ask Kevin, what do you think about the ongoing performance management? How can we make sure that we are just keeping up with that and that we are doing it on an ongoing basis rather than doing it periodically, like once every year, like we used to have in the old days?
I think the important thing is, as Talisa said, right, making it part of the day-to-day discussion. So moving away from the formality of once a year, second time a year, and really understanding and going back to the basics of what's the performance review discussion there for, right? And I think Lisa kind of matched the two pieces. You've got the performance piece, how are you doing on your goals and objectives, but you've also got the development and the growth piece. And I think a lot of organizations kind of merge the two together. And if we make it more about development and growth and steering and helping someone to become better at what they're doing and growing and developing, it becomes easier to give that year-round feedback. So, to answer your question on how do you make it more natural, it's not about here's your rating and here's your number on a scale. It's about, hey, you did something really great in the last meeting, or you did something really great in this last project. Let's talk about what you did really well, and let's talk about some areas of opportunity, or giving that feedback live, ongoing would be kind of the best way to do it, to just embed it into what you do. And then when you do have to give tough feedback, it becomes more natural. It's not about having to candy code it or do anything. It's like, okay, I'm just getting more feedback today from Kevin. That's what he normally does. Today I did better than yesterday, or maybe not. So really embedding feedback as a way of working.
Okay, so, but I would also like to ask, ongoing feedback and just giving that feedback, just on an ongoing basis. But how do we make it into a concrete format so it's not something subjective, but like an objective performance assessment? Roberts?
So making it part of a objective performance assessment kind of starts, as Lisa and Kevin were alluding to. You have to start with the organization's values and make sure that you're operationalizing those values, and make sure that everybody is on the same page about what leadership looks like in the organization and what the values are of the organization and what is going to be expected and condoned versus not, right? Because your culture starts with both what you're explicitly stating and then also what you allow. And so if you're not measuring based on those values, then those really aren't the values that people are going to believe are important to your organization. As far as making things objective, you can certainly put together a formal performance process, but our world is changing so much and evolving so much that those types of assessments don't really make sense. And certainly it's not a one size fits all perspective. And so when you are taking a look at your organization, you should feel very supported in looking at what the strategy is of the business, and then making sure that whatever your talent strategy turns out to be, that it's aligned with that business strategy. And then you can move forward and make sure that your leaders are, trained, as Lisa was saying, trained and comfortable and ready to be able to hold their teams accountable. They're having those regular conversations, that trust is built. And then when feedback is provided, as Kevin was saying, it's not a surprise and it doesn't feel like it's punitive because that relationship is built there.
Okay, so we kind of say that, okay, we start with the value. So we make sure that we are setting that clear so that everyone is aligned, and that our performance management is also in line, synced with our values. And some of our audience was mentioning about the goals. So how do we combine that? Start with the values and just put it into a structure that is also in line with the company goals. Jones?
Yes, I'll interject here. I think in a lot of organizations that I've worked with, from a standpoint, you want to start at the top. So essentially, what are the goals of the CEO, and those things cascade down. So how you cascade it down from a functional perspective to the actual local location, and making sure that everybody's on the same page and seeing how your values and your goals kind of tie in and move up the chain, so to speak. So I think that's important to have that communication, that cascade process in place. And I have worked for some organizations where we didn't really do it timely. And so you're halfway into the year or more, and you're just now getting goals. So we need to be very timely with that. So however your fiscal year starts off, let's go ahead and have a honest discussion, a timely discussion with those respective goals. And then just to quickly interject here, kind of echoing some things that Kevin and Lisa and Nicole Roberts stated, was about the cadence of the performance management cycle. And I was actually with the organization, and we moved from annual performance reviews to actually doing them quarterly. And so when we went through that transformation phase, of course, some of the managers as well as the employees were like, this is going to be too much. And it really had to be kind of a change of a mindset. And in the end, there was value in it where you're getting that feedback timely. It becomes more of a conversation instead of an activity one time of a year. And you're able to connect the dots a little bit better versus just getting that 1 year review.
Perfect. So I kind of get everything now together, starting with the values, making it ongoing, and just making sure that we have continuous feedback, and that we are now having the goals cascaded from top to down. But that also comes to a point, Kevin, I would like to ask you this question. This sounds so simple, but in an organization that's global, how do you make sure that this is just happening seamlessly from top to down, from all the parts of the organization, the being in different locations, being with different cultures? How do you manage that across the locations?
I think one way we do it is by leveraging technology, right? So from a very tactical position, or a very tactical way of looking at it, is we utilize one global system where everyone goes in, puts their goals and objectives in. We have a standard format for how we talk about our goals and how we share those goals. And it really is the local HR teams going in and looking to see what's in there. So there's an exercise that we do sometimes with the leadership teams where we get to goal setting time, and we'll go in and just pull out some random goals from, let's say, a certain level, maybe it's directors, and we'll share it with that executive group and say, hey, here's some goals and objectives that your team has put in place. And we'll pick some really good ones, and we'll pick some ones that are definitely could use some work. And we'll say, this is how your team is being set up for success. How does this cascade onward? And then we'll do some coaching and we'll share, hey, here's a gold standard of what some great goals and objectives look like. And I hate to use the cliche SMART, piece around specific and measurable and actionable and relevant and time bound, but those are really important. Those are the basics, but then you get into the complexity then of calibrating the size of the goals, calibrating the stretch level of goals, right? Putting too much in there. So I'll leave that to Lisa or one of the Nicoles to kind of share some thoughts on that piece. But that's where, to me, it gets really challenging when you look at the size and scope of the goals.
Lisa, you want to add anything on top of that?
Yeah, I think that that's a great point, Kevin. I think that, I have, in every company that I've worked in, I have had global teams. And my most recent role, the only continent I didn't have an employee on was Greenland. So they were literally everywhere. And we were a small company, so I didn't have localized HRBPs. I didn't have any of that. It was me. But I agree with you that a system is the right thing to do, and actually at any size of a company. Okay. I implemented a system that made it easy for managers globally to go in and put their one-on-ones, right? Their notes from the one-on-ones, not only the manager, but the employee as well. They had a prep area where they would prep for the one-on-one coming up. And it was their responsibility both to put bullet items in there to talk about, right, during that one-on-one, and then put in all of your feedback and any action items and et cetera. It gave a place where employees could set their IDP, right? That is so huge and so powerful to give people the power and the autonomy to say, this is what I want to be. This is where I want to be in a year, and these are the steps I'm going to take to get there, right? And have that be part of the conversation. But I agree with you that when you have a global team and you actually do have localized HR people, the training is the biggest thing, right? Is making sure that everyone understands, communication. Like, this all comes down to communication. And if it's communicated ineffectively, it'll blow up. It won't work. Right. So
I'd be curious, Lisa, when you talk about the training, so you trained a lot of managers and executives in the performance management. I'm curious of what exactly did you share with them, and what did that training look like? Was it a trust-based training or?
Yeah, it was definitely trust-based. I started with the top, right? Because that's where it has to come from, right? And it really, because I do startups, that's my thing. I'm a startup girl. It's usually, my CEOs have never been CEOs before, right? And so they're coming and going, well, I don't know, right? What is this, right? What does this mean? So it requires me to, and I'm going to go right to that trust, right? That I have that relationship with the executive team, that they trust me, that they can come in and say, I have no idea what you're talking about. Teach me, right? That's part of it. And it starts at the top, right? Making sure that that we're all on the same page as an executive team of what our goals are, right? And then we strategize on a communication strategy to communicate that to the organization, right? Again, it's all about communication and mentoring and coaching. But if you don't have that as part of your culture, it's going to be awkward, right? It's just, and if people aren't open to it, right? And it has to be, the executive team has to be open to being coached. It's like, it's mandatory. Like otherwise it doesn't work, right? Because it breaks somewhere along the way. But yeah, I think that, training is super important. I did it on my own, and the system, and because I was doing it on my own, the system was absolutely imperative. And by
the way, Lisa, Sheila is asking about the system, what you were using as a system.
Okay. Yes. It's called, and I just completely blanked on it. Hold on one second. Oh my God.
Okay. No problem. We can come back.
2 seconds, because it just went straight out of my head.
No problem. No problem. We'll come back to it.
Yeah.
In the meantime, I like to ask Robert, so that we started talking about the individual involvement as well. So how can we make sure that the individual is also part of his own performance management? Do you do any personal feedback, or just self-evaluation? How do we just incorporate that to the performance management?
So I always encourage weekly one-on-ones with all of your direct reports to begin developing that relationship. And then periodically, when you're doing your one-on-ones, set aside one of those conversations for development. It's a really fantastic tool to use when talking about succession planning as well, because you can identify those gaps on people that have expressed interest in future growth opportunities, that you can identify those gaps and begin to put those plans in place as far as what skills are needed for that. Also, people have to understand, it's the old thing, like, what's in it for me? Why is this important to me? Why should I care? Getting people to be involved in their performance management, they have to see what that kind of end goal looks like. So if you ask somebody to do a self-evaluation, but then you don't ever do anything with it, and it's just like a check the box exercise, the odds that you're going to have the same level of engagement with that are slim to none when it comes around the next time, right? Similar to surveying and asking for feedback. If you ask for feedback and you don't do anything with it, then you're not going to get as high participation the next time around. But if you're going to do a situation where you have a self-evaluation piece of your performance management, then make sure that the leaders are reviewing those prior to the conversation, and so that they know, based on their perception of the person's performance and theirs, they can see if there's any mismatches and any disconnects, so they can be sure to discuss that when it comes time for that conversation. We want to be equipping our leaders to make sure that these conversations are intentional, they are productive. It's not just a check the box exercise. And it's, as Lisa was saying, it's not looking just at in the past, that we're looking forward and what are we doing to improve the relationship and improve their performance going forward.
Mm-hmm. So, by the way, Lisa just
really quick.
found
Yeah,
the
I'm
name.
going to jump in and talk. Okay, so I don't know why this system went straight out of my head. It's called Chart Hub, and it's fantastic. I highly, highly recommend if you're looking for a tool. It's really, really good. The thing about it, to your point, Nicole Roberts, is that those IDP plans feed to what the goals are, right? It also tracks OKRs, and OKRs, I do a balance of OKRs that are personal, right? And then ones that are tied to the mission and goals of the company, right? And the team, et cetera, right? And those, they feed directly to that, what those personal goals are. And they are visited, they are required to be visited every one-on-one. Managers, it is not an option. And I go in and I look and make sure that there's notes. And if I catch anybody who hasn't been making them, I circle back around and go, how can I support you here? We're not doing our job here, right? But to your point, it's nothing should be a surprise. There should be no surprises. Reviews should be just a check-in, right? How did the year go? Let's celebrate what you did great. Let's celebrate what, the team did great, all of that. It's not a, wagging your finger at someone saying, well, you didn't do any of these things, right? It's, it makes it collaborative, right? It's a collaborative thing, and it should be collaborative.
That's really important, by the way. I was also reading some of the comments. People are mentioning trust. People are mentioning that, being sincere. And you're also just like, talking about that. It doesn't need to be something like, good to have so that you're ticking the boxes, but it needs to be just like, sincere, authentic. So like a one-to-one connection, authentic connection with the employee and the manager, and the trust issue as well. So Jones, I'd like to come to you on that. About the trust, how do we make sure that we are building that trust, helping the leaders as well? Because like, I sometimes feel like we are putting too much pressure on the leaders, and like, what does it help for the leaders to just like, build that trust, to be sincere, to be genuine during that performance management process?
So I definitely think it's about communication, but at the same time, I also think that every employee has a responsibility to take charge of their own performance. And so as much as you say it's on the leaders, it's also on the employee. And one of the things that I do coach employees on is always have a folder for yourself. And so whether or not it's a Kevin folder, a Lisa folder, a Nicole folder, I always have that folder where I'm working on stretch assignments, emails that I've gotten from a complimentary standpoint, and that way I'm able to review it. I also encourage you to review your calendar, because sometimes you don't realize I was in this meeting, I participated in this project. And so when you're actually getting to do the review, you're not having to necessarily rack your brain. You can actually go to the quantitative, qualitative data that you have relative in this folder. And so I think that also helps to build trust if you bring facts and information relative to your performance.
Okay, so if I were to start my performance management, like reinvent it from scratch, what would be the first step? We talked about the values, how we are just like, how we want to start with the why we exist, and just like, just linking that to the performance management. But what else? If I was like a HR VP or like the HR director and want to reinvent the performance management so that I am just like, in line with the future of work, everything, all the changes that's been going on recently. Roberts.
So if I'm understanding your question, you're asking, so we've got our values figured out. We've figured out the strategy of the business. We know what the goals are. Are you speaking more as far as the structure, or are you looking for more of what additional goes into it?
Yeah, like the structure. I mean, what is the goal from there? Because like we talked about the strategy and how we're planning it, but how do we take action on that?
Yeah, so I mean, you have to look at size of your organization, right? Age of your organization, whether or not you have a system like how Lisa was using ChartHop, or a lot of HCMs have a performance management module that you can use to, track, monitor, create cycles, those types of things. If you are a small organization and you don't have, a lot of budget, or, you don't have the funds for a full system, I mean, it literally can start as small as just having those conversations, making sure that you're keeping, your records, as Nicole Jones was saying, having your folder tracking your own performance and what you're doing and what you're trying to do with your career. It's hard to really say like what the next step is, because it's so tailored on the organization. So small business, large business, whatever, it's not one size fits all. But your next step could be, okay, we've decided this year we're at least going to have goals for the organization and goals for individuals, and we're going to start tracking at whatever cadence makes sense for us. A lot of organizations also, I mean, you've seen where they said, we got rid of performance reviews and we just do our check-ins, and we just make sure that people have support, because we only had performance reviews before because it was directly tied to compensation. And now we have more creative ways that we're managing compensation. So I think that's the conversation that needs to be had is, does it make sense to have some kind of formal system, or what works for us, so that people don't feel any kind of undue pressure to be, oh, well, I heard X organization does this, we have to do this. You don't. You need to do what makes sense for your people. And maybe you even need to do a survey with your organization and find out what's going to be most impactful for them.
Okay, so I got the survey, so we can just like, for to make it tailor-made, we can just like, go with the survey method as well. And you also mentioned that we are not linking the performance management to compensation anymore. So what are we linking it to? Why are we doing the performance management, Kevin? Did we lose you, Kevin? Lisa, we can go on with you.
It looks like he's frozen. Yeah. I think that if I'm going to put it in one word, I'm going to say it's growth, right? That's what we're encouraging. The individual, the company, the product, whatever it is, right? It's growth, right? We are nurturing growth with performance reviews. I personally don't like them to be tied to monetary. I think that complicates it. It makes it very awkward almost, right? Because it can become combative, right? Like if someone feels like, well, my review is based, my raise is based on my review, or my everyone, you automatically go, oh, right? Like, oh shoot, this is different, right? It feels different. It changes the vibe. It changes the outcome for sure, right? So I agree that I don't think that they should be tied to monetary at all. I think that's a separate thing that happens based on company budgets and stuff like that, right? Not necessarily performance. Because if you have a poor performer, well in advance of that 1 year potential raise that you're going to give, or at least you better, right? I'm going to touch, Nicole, on what you talked about, and creating that culture of open communication. I think that's really important, right? And encouraging honest dialogue, right, in all meetings across organizations is the start of all of it, right? It's there's so many components to creating that safe haven for open conversations. I'm going to put a link in the chat of a blog that I literally wrote 2 weeks ago about exactly that, not realizing that we were going to be circling around on that maybe you can share it with people, because it's got some good tips in there on how to start that, right? How to have those the meetings that are open, and it's okay to talk about, everything and anything, right?
So we are saying, by the way, Kevin, the question was, if we are not linking the performance management to compensation, what are we linking it to? Was my question. And Lisa was saying it was growth. Do you want to add something else on top of that?
Yeah, I think, and I think Nicole Roberts mentioned that, some organizations have, went the route of no ratings and doing away with rating systems. But I think that kind of was a flash in the pan, because I think what organizations found is that, particularly as larger organizations, how do you recognize and drive a performance culture without having some linkage back? And I think what would happen is that when you decouple the two, companies then start to have something that's less trustful, less transparent behind the scenes, that's driving compensation. If there's not a performance rating for individuals, how are we differentiating between who delivered or who under-delivered on their goals and objectives? And it's a tough conversation to have to somebody. Hey, you're getting less of a bonus or less of a salary increase this year because you didn't meet these goals and objectives. But it's an even more challenging discussion to have that says, hey, you're not getting as big of an increase. And I really can articulate the why behind that and link it back. And it all goes back to having the right goals and objectives. So I do think there's a link there, but there's definitely a timing piece where you can separate and say, hey, we're going to focus now on the discussion, and we're going to separate the compensation to a different time. So you're not going to have your performance discussion today, and then at the end of that discussion, get an increase or a bonus amount. Separate the timing so that people really understand the value of the discussion. It's a challenging one. I think a lot of companies struggle with.
Yeah. So I would also like to ask you, Jones, this is going to be for you. And in the old days, we would link the performance management to the promotions as well, not only to the compensation, but to promotion. So how do you see that changing now?
Having a hard time getting off of mute. So I think we're constantly evolving, especially post-pandemic or, relative to kind of our structures. I still do feel like there are some companies that are linking performance to the promotion process because essentially you want to have those workers that are your top performers promoted into those higher level positions. So I would say probably from my stand, most of the organizations I've worked with most recently are still tying the performance to promotion processes.
Okay, so that's really great here because our audience is also commenting about that, and I would like to ask one more thing about punishment because some of them are also mentioning that side, like the performance management, not generally being linked. I mean, we know that what's it's to have would be good to have, but in practice, that's usually not we experience in the organizations yet. I mean, yes, we have some organizations who are adopting it and just like, doing it seamlessly and in a trustful way, but we still just like experience that in some companies where it is used as a punishment rather than a growth. So, how do we make sure that this is not just perceived as something like a punishment, but yet perceived as a way to just like, help people thrive and just like help with their growth. And you were also mentioning about the communication. If we can link this to the communication piece as well, how we can communicate this, like that this is like something as part of their growth plan, but not like a punishment plan.
Yeah.
So I think training is very critical with training your management. So, for instance, if you're looking at, let's say, a 1 year process, because most companies or a lot of companies are still doing the 1 year process. So you don't want to deal with the recency factor. You don't want to deal with a devil's horn effect, et cetera. So everything that the employee does is good versus everything the employee does is bad. And so you really have to be objective. In a lot of the companies that I've supported from an HR executive standpoint, we do calibrations. So in those calibration sessions, all members of that particular management team for that function are somewhat being a barometer for the next department and their peer, et cetera, to say whether or not they really think this employee is a 5 when the employee really is a 2. And so you have to challenge those ideals and perspectives from a calibration standpoint. Also, another thing that often happens is you have some managers that are tougher on their group of employees versus another manager who is actively giving out 4s and 5s, as opposed to the next manager who's just giving out 2s and 1s if you're on a 5-point scale. And so that calibration and dialogue amongst the group helps to challenge that. And then as an HR person, I'm usually present in those conversations to answer the right questions. If there are red flags that appear, okay, this person is a low performer this year, but the previous 4 years they were 5. So walk me through what happened and getting that information and that insight. So,
By the way, Lisa, I just added your Medium article, the link in the comments section. So if anyone's interested, you can just like check the comments and read the piece from there.
Thank you.
Okay, so I now have some questions from the audience. By the way, if you have, just like Lisa shared, if you have some positive experience using some HR tech, anything that you use for performance management, someone is asking about Bumble HR, and we also have, you know, usually performance management is being resonated with, it's like it has a negative connotation as I see through the comments. How do we make sure that it is not perceived, it's not just like connotated as something negative, but like positive in the culture? What has been your experience? If you have some tips about that I would love to hear that. Kevin?
I think I would go back to the individual and the trust piece. So where's the benefit for them? What's in it for me, so to speak? So talking about their personal development. So we're talking about the goals and objectives and delivery of them. But I think part of that performance discussion is also the coaching and development and the career discussion of where they want to go to and what they want to do in their next role. And what are some things that they can experience in their current role that'll help the organization meet its goals, but will also help that person develop. hey, you want to become this type of director? Let's talk about the different building blocks you need to get there. Let's build some of that into your goals and objectives. So the person sees a benefit and outcome. Hey, my boss really is here trying to help me move along in the process. And the other piece is the tactical one of just the performance review itself and the goals and objectives. It's not about being a good person or a bad person. Sometimes we miss a target. Sometimes we miss our number from a sales perspective. And it's about how do we react to it, right? How did you respond to it? Did you do everything that you could do outside of that? So those are the things I think is trying to stay positive and show the individual where the opportunities exist.
Mm-hmm. Roberts, you want to add anything?
Yeah, could you tell I was like ready? I just want to add on to what Kevin was saying as far as when it comes to those goals and objectives and whether or not you met them or not, right? One of the pieces that I want to make sure that we really call out is making sure that the individual believes that their goals are attainable. Nothing's going to demotivate somebody faster than having goals that they don't feel like no matter what they do, they can't achieve them. So if something happens, mid-year or 30 days into setting that goal, right, that is going to change the entire target and whether or not that's attainable, I think we need to make sure that we have a process in place that can remain fluid and can meet those changing needs.
Yeah, that's really crucial because making people just discouraged by the system. By the way, are you on mute? Did you want to?
I was going to add one other comment if I could, just
Please.
building off that around the the delivery of the goal. So if someone misses a goal, it's about looking at the analysis of, okay, well, did you do everything that you could do to achieve that? So let's say the market condition changed. Okay, that took place. That's a non-controllable. But what are all the things that you could have done to try to reset the game or go about that? So really just talking about what's within their control so that they feel some ownership in the process. And you could actually rate individuals on that to say, did they, uncover every stone or lift every stone trying to get after their goal or their target?
Yeah, I'm going to build on that, Kevin. I agree with you 100%. I think that, employees have a responsibility to guide their growth as well, right? But I think that more importantly, with those types of changes that you're talking about, industry, product, all of that, right? Which you have to take into consideration because sometimes they happen mid-year or mid-quarter or whatever, right? It's our responsibility as managers, right? To go back and revisit that. And if you're having your regular one-on-ones, that should be part of it. Hey, listen, the products, our product roadmap has changed. We're now doing this, right? And therefore, our OKRs, your IDP plan may need to be revisited based on that, right? And so we're going to move things around. It's a living, breathing thing, and it should be. If you're not continuously looking at it and making sure that it's still in line with the company goals, because things change, right? Things could change tomorrow, right? We could all be going home during a pandemic, and then what, right? You're holding that person back if you wait until a review to say, well, but it changed and you knew that, and so why didn't you change it, right? It's irresponsible on our part if we're not communicating again at a big scale. The company has shifted, right? The product has shifted, right? We're doing this now. Okay, everybody regroup, right? We need to make sure that we have the right hiring plan in place to support that, right? We're going to change OKRs based on that so that we're supporting that. What has changed in the team and what they're responsible for delivering, right? I think, the bigger onus is on us to make sure that we're communicating and then handing that baton to your point, and the employee needs to be, their hand needs to be on that baton as well. They need to be driving that as well from a personal standpoint.
Okay, so we're talking about goals, but I would like to ask some best practices in your practice. And Jules, this comes to you. How many goals? And is it like per Q, per half a year? Because we said that once a year is too long. But what is that right cadence, and how many goals should we set so that we make it simple and attainable?
I don't necessarily think there's a magic number, but what I've seen as probably a best practice is if you can kind of make those goals digestible in a smaller time frame. So think of it from a quarter perspective, and probably 2 to 3 goals, so that you can keep track with those goals and try to manage and achieve those.
Okay. By the way, we are receiving so many comments about 360 evaluation from the audience. So I would really like to. Yeah.
That's a whole nother topic. Don't get me started.
Okay.
I
briefly.
want to make a comment
please.
about how when we're measuring those goals as well. It's not just whether or not you achieve those goals, it's how you achieve those goals. So when we were talking before about making sure you're really clear on your values, are we also measuring people based on how they're demonstrating the organization's values, so that we're not rewarding toxic producers that get, check it all off. Yes, I did this. I had high sales targets. I did all of these things, but I also left a trail of destruction behind me because I can't communicate. I don't treat people with respect, right? I don't behave in a way that is in alignment with the values of the organization. So I want to make sure that we definitely call that out, that should be a essential part of any performance management process. Is not only do we have the goals and things that can be measured objectively, but also are we measuring how people get those goals accomplished?
Okay, so how do we incorporate the values into those discussions? Because usually when we have one-on-ones, when we have the performance management reviews, it's all about the goals, it's all about the daily tasks, but no one really talks about the values. How do we make sure that that's part of the conversation as well? Kevin?
I have a question. It looks like Kevin's frozen. I have a clarifying question. When you say values, are you speaking about the company values?
The company values,
how we tie those to OKRs or KPIs or whatever?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Kevin, you're back online, yeah? I'll let you take it.
Yep.
Okay.
Thanks. So linking the values to the performance measurements of the goals, I think it's about, and Nicole started to speak to this, right? It's about the how. So you delivered your goals, but can you articulate how you live the values to do those different aspects, whether it's performance, whether it's teamwork, whether it's diversity, inclusion? How did you live the values in the achievement of the goals? And then calling out one particular area that may make sense. So I think you want it to be part of the language you use of how you talk about the success of the goal should incorporate the values into that. Because really, if somebody's not living the values, they're probably not going to be with your organization not that long. So it doesn't make sense to rate on the individual value. It's more, how do you bring that value to life in the execution of the goals and objectives?
Mm-hmm.
We actually put our values as competencies, and we weighted them equally with whether or not the goal was met. And so we showed the organization, not only do we care that you're achieving your goals, but we care equally as much how you're achieving those goals and that you are demonstrating the values of the organization. And our rating scale in that case was, do they or do they not demonstrate this value? And so if you got a rating that you do not demonstrate respect, teamwork, whatever that value is, then you didn't meet the target for the goal.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree with you, Nicole and Kevin, that having core competencies is critical, right? That for different levels, right? It makes it easier for HR teams to communicate because OKRs, and KPIs will feed from that, right? But it's really clear for the employees, this is what I need to do to get here, right? And those core competencies must come from the values of the company, right? They have to be baked into that.
Yeah. So as we are coming towards the end of our time, I would like to touch a bit on the leadership buy-in, Because if we don't have the buy-in of the leadership, and we talked a bit about the training as well, but it's really crucial to have the leadership buy-in. Otherwise, we know that no change is just like sustainable within the organization. So how can we make sure that we have the leader buy-in and the leadership team is just like sticking to the performance management strategy of the company? Let's start with Jones.
I think this is where you really tie in the linkage because it's going to benefit the leadership. So from the cascading of the goals to them being able to make their numbers, essentially, as the organization performs well, they perform well. And so I think any great leader is going to support the performance management process and be an active part of it in carrying out that goal in itself.
Roberts?
Anytime that you share anything with the organization, you should first start with the executive team and make sure that they're on board with whatever you're doing. So your process, your message to the organization is that we have made a decision at the executive level that these are the things that matter to us, and this is how we're going to measure it, and this is the process. And then we, as the HR leaders, support them. What does support look like? As Lisa was saying, hey, I see that you're not abiding by the process that we all agreed upon ahead of time, right? How can I best support you? And making sure that we remind them that people will continually look to their leadership and how they behave to give them cues on how they should behave.
Mm-hmm. Kevin?
I think it starts with mirroring the right activities. So it starts with them sitting down with their direct reports and showing what a great performance discussion looks like and having an expectation that they have that similar discussion with the next level down. Because as much as HR can get up there and talk about it, it doesn't have the same impact as their manager doing it, as leaders actually doing it themselves.
Great. And Lisa?
I'm going to go back to the how you get buy-in, right? Which is the very first block that, that we have to jump over, right? And that's, for me, data. I don't roll out anything unless I have the data to support it. And that means from multiple points, right? Do I think that the company has the maturity to roll this out and support it continuously, not for a month or 6 months? Right? How many times have you seen people roll out programs and 6 months later, employees are like, well, what happened to that? Whatever, right? Because it just died, right? So, data. If you don't have all the data to go to your executive team and say, this is what we're proposing, and this is why we think it's going to be effective, right? Understanding what's important to them, but what's also important to the employees, right? It has to be a good mix, right? But it has to come from data. You have to have the data to support it. Otherwise, you have nothing really to stand on other than, well, we think it's going to be great. Well, why? Why do you think it's going to be great? What is in it? We've talked about what's in it for me, right? What's in it for the company, right? Show me where that's going to help us. So it's data. It starts with data.
True. Otherwise, it's just like another thing, and it feels like a burden on their shoulders, and then we don't get the buy-in. Okay, so this was an awesome conversation. I would like to summarize it in a way that, okay, we make sure that everything is in line with the values, and we start with the why, and we have also the structure in place, and we are getting the leadership buy-in through data and through make sure that this is happening not like ticking the boxes way, but just like having those conversations, genuine conversations on an ongoing basis with one-on-ones, and that we make sure that this is helping the growth of the employees. So any final remarks for the new beginners or the HR people that would help them on their way to success with their performance management systems? Let's start with Kevin.
I think it's just to get in there and start having discussions with people and think about what's the outcome, right? It's performance of the business, driving the business performance, because that's why we're there. And it's helping the employee to grow and develop and have, consistent feedback.
Okay, great. Roberts?
Build the relationship first and have patience and grace with yourself when you're trying to implement anything new for the organization. Pay attention to the feedback that you get initially and then build on positivity.
Perfect. Lisa?
Getting started, I would say I'm going to mirror and echo what Nicole said. You have to do an assessment, make sure that, everyone's ready for it, right? And ready to support it. And I do believe that it's time for us as HR leaders to revamp how we do program performance management, right? It needs to support growth and empowerment of our employees.
Perfect. And Jones?
I would say evaluate where you are, see what tools you already have in place, what you can leverage. And then if you don't know, contact Nicole, Kevin, and Lisa. They have all the answers.
Amazing. So thank you for your invaluable insights and sharing your experience with the audience. So to my message to the audience, we still have more panels that are coming up till the end of this month. So stay tuned and make sure that you sign up for those. And please don't forget to get connected with our panelists, myself on LinkedIn, so that we stay in touch. And until the next time, take care. Bye, everyone.